I like the idea of bibliotherapy. Like every time we come to this, we have these like fresh, new conversations. There is a sense of what conversations are we willing to have?
This is making me teary again. We've all lived a lifetime of experiences. We've probably all loved somebody or grieved somebody at some point in our lives. So we all already have everything we need to make a wonderful poem.
But, you know, there's an argument to be made that all poems, at some sense, fail. I cannot tell you exactly what I think and feel, and for you to receive that exactly as intended. What the poem that is successful is. Welcome to the Poetry Vessel. On this podcast, we invite guests across multiple disciplines to discuss the intersection of poetry with philosophy, psychology, the occult, neuroscience, popular culture, and more. I'm your host, Nathan Hassall, Malibu Poet Laureate, published poet, and professional book editor. And this is my wife, Rachael. She's an expert in IO psychology, plus she's the other half of the Poetry Vessel enterprise. Ready to learn more about poetry's transformational power? Let's break open the vessel and find out what happens. Welcome back to the Poetry Vessel. Today, I really just want poetry to be a celebration. I feel like there's been so much going on in the world. We're looking all around, we're being inundated with the socio-political, and sometimes I think it's good to just step back and focus on something beautiful and sustaining, even if that means we need to go back to the rest of the work that we have. So yes, I want today to celebrate, but also to consider this question. Does every poem contain within it love and grief, however slight? With that question in mind, we're going to read a poem from our featured poet today, and we're going to pull a couple of poems from the mystery box.
I can't wait. We've got some really good ones today.
So Rachael, do you think every poem has within it love and grief?
Ooh, that's a big question, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, it's hard to say definitively that every single poem on earth ever written, generalize every single poem that's ever been written contains love and grief. I think you can see love everywhere. I don't know if you can see grief everywhere. So, yeah, that is a question intended for minds greater than my own, I think.
Every poem is born, and in some senses, every poem either dies or ends. There's an ending, which I think is what is part of the grieving, even if there's something not specifically tied to grief itself. I feel like there's something when we express something in a certain way. I think grief comes out. And when I think of the love, I think of even the love of creating a poem, no matter how frustrating it is, there's a love in the work that comes through. So the thing about the question is, I don't think it's yes or no. Obviously, it's like to explore it. So I should have asked it more open-endedly. But I think there's an argument to be made there. And I think there's going to be plenty of counter arguments, which I'm looking forward to reading both. So
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I know for a fact that the next poem that we're featuring contains both love and grief. So maybe we should just jump in to the poem right away.
I think that's a good idea. All right.
Before we share this week's featured poet, I just want to let everyone out there know, if this is your first time listening to the Poetry Vessel podcast, here's how it works. So every episode that you see, Nathan and I will be selecting a featured poet for our episode. To become a featured poet on the Poetry Vessel podcast, we've included a link below with all of our submission guidelines. Go to www.thepoetryvessel.com to submit a poem to be considered to be featured on the Poetry Vessel podcast. We also select 1 to 3 mystery box poems. So by the end of this episode, we promise to read some amazing poetry for you with our featured poet today and 1 to 3 mystery box poems, but you'll have to listen to the entire episode to find out when they emerge.
And who's going to emerge?
Could it be you next?
You, right now.
Without further ado, Nathan, would you like to introduce our next featured poet on the Poetry Vessel podcast?
I would love to. So our next feature is Lexi Pelle. Lexi Pelle was the winner of the 2022 Jack McCarthy Book Prize. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Plume, West Branch, River Styx, Rattle, and Ninth Letter. She is the author of the poetry collection Let Go with the Lights On, published by Right Bloody Publishing in 2023. This poem was previously published in Teresian, elderly couple found dead, buried under snow. The man on top of the woman, frozen like the slice of wedding cake my mother kept for years in the freezer. They'd been there a week. They walked a mile before giving up and lying down 100 yards from the house. They couldn't see through the storm. How close we are to what we'll never reach. I imagine her in snow-soaked denim, like a pressed flower beneath him. What they said in their final moment. I'd let the flurries melt into our four-poster bed. We'd role-play safety. Not tonight, honey. I'm tired. Pass the hand cream. You get the light. There's definitely love and grief in there.
100% there's love and grief. I feel like I always need a minute after listening to poems on this podcast to just really let it soak. And maybe some of you out there feel like that too. Sometimes it's great to hear a poem more than once. I heard recently that poetry is meant to not only just be read, but to be reread. So you're always welcome to go back and hear the poem again. For me, when I first read this poem, I had a really emotional reaction to it. This is only our third episode picking a featured poet, so congratulations again to Lexi for being our third featured poet here on the Poetry Vessel. And it's never easy, even only with 3 episodes, to select a featured poet because so many of the poems we read are so powerful and so wonderful. But this poem stood out to me immediately. I teared up just reading it before I'd even heard anyone like Nathan read the poem aloud. So I want to commend this poet for, first and foremost, for the emotion in the imagery that they brought in and for how you read it, Nathan, because I really liked that. So I'm rambling.
I think this poem, I read somewhere, this is a misquoting, but close enough, that it's from Kafka. It's about how poetry is like a frozen axe that like breaks open the spaces inside us. And this poem, using the freeze, the coldness, the blue, broke something open in me. And as you were saying about when we're selecting poems, there is a sense of there's so many brilliant poems that come in. Where are we willing to go in that moment? What conversations are we willing to have on the internet? So much happens in here in these short lines, these 2-line stanzas. And it just starts after the title that tells you exactly what's happened. The man on top of the woman. That in so many contexts is sensual or sexual. But here it's saturated with the grief because they're buried. The snow had buried them.
Mm.
And then the movement straight away to frozen like the slice of wedding cake. There's so much to be said about this image and about how it makes me feel and about how it like contorts my body almost to feel like I'm a slice, almost like a machete that's cold, because it's slice also rhymes with ice. So there's something in it that like that broken freeze is the only way I can describe it right now.
Can I just say, even just what you're doing with your hands? Um, I mean, there's a few instances in this poem where we get this kind of imagery. It's like you start it with the man on top of the woman. Then you think about slices of wedding cake, which are also layered. And then you also have the line, like a pressed flower beneath him. So there's this layering and there's this pressing that is happening thematically a few different times in the poem. I also found it interesting, the title itself, elderly couple found dead, buried under snow. Now it reads like a headline, right? And there's a few instances or a few songs I can think of in general, or maybe just one song in particular. I'm going to use my second opportunity in a podcast to bring up the Beatles with A Day in the Life, where A Day in the Life is a song that's also written in response to the news. I read the news today, oh boy, I think it goes.
Yeah, and it starts, this is something of when people say, oh, a poet is a witness, the man on top of the woman, not devastatingly the man frozen, dead, was on top of the sad woman. It doesn't like add all
Speaking
these
of word
layers.
choice.
Yeah, it's very, it's matter of fact. It was like this. My mother kept them in the freezer, and it's staying cold, cold, cold. And there's details. They walked a mile before giving up and lying down. Why they were out
So
in the
sad.
storm, we don't know. There's like a mystery in here of what was going on here. And then it takes it to a metaphysical level when it gets to how close we are to line break / slice what we'll never reach. And there's something in that. There's always this grasping. Poetry's grasping at something and you can never get the words exactly how you're trying to get them. So there's something in here that becomes meta. It commentates on itself and on the poem, but it doesn't do that for ages. It's not self-indulgent. It kind of lifts it to that and it goes straight back in. I imagine her in snow-soaked denim. The imagination is coming in. It's picturing more.
Mm.
And there's so much in here that is cold until it moves towards its ending with the you get the light where it ends.
Ugh.
And I have a couple things there. Is you get the light is saying turn the light off. And also understand. You understand the light, especially through this.
This is making me teary again.
Yeah.
I think that's the part that got me the first time I read it was the it's so easy to put yourself in that frame of mind of I feel like I'm already an empathetic person to start. So often
Hence the tears.
when I do read a sad story on the news or something, it's not uncommon that I'll cry. So I couldn't help with this poem, again, project my own life onto it and think about, our love, how we end our days together in bed. Nathan likes his hand cream.
Me.
I'm just kidding. I won't use that.
Working hands.
Working- not
It's
not
not-
not the Burt's Bees almond.
not almond.
Not sponsored. But I guess it's that idea of that elderly couple, those elderly people in love, and those little moments that you share with each other every single night. And there's something in the idea that the last thing that this man did for this woman, for this couple, is, I mean, I guess you could look at it in more than one way, but it seemed to me it was the attempt to keep her warm.
Yeah.
That, and by covering her with his body, that attempt to save her and to keep her warm, and that obviously got me really emotional. So I'm so glad that you brought up that movement from ice to warmth. Like, I can see the ice at the beginning, talking about the cake in the freezer, then the snow soaked denim, I'm getting water, it's melting, to the end of the poem, you get the light. So there's that transition from icy cold to melting warmth, which was just absolutely brilliant by Lexi here.
It's beautiful what you said about why the man was on top of the woman, because I hadn't really considered it in enough depth. I'm like, you've like opened this poem to me in another way. And something that I also noticed that's at play here, I'm very big on the idea of the tension of opposites. It's a very Jungian idea that we're seeking to reconcile opposites within us. So when opposites are at play within art, they gain power. So the opposite that's at play is we often refer to death as bitter. There's a bitterness.
The bitter end.
The cold is bitter. However, there's sweetness. There's wedding cake. There's at the end, the speaker says, "Not tonight, honey." And obviously, honey is a term of endearment, it's a sweetness. So in this poem, there's the bittersweet of death and life constantly at play. And I find that just incredibly beautiful to think about. And it's something that when I'm working with craft, when I'm working with poets, when I'm saying to consider how these oppositions are in tension and how it can bring strength to the work itself, it's like that's what I see playing out here.
Mm. So many excellent points in there, Nathan. I think I just want to pause on the idea of the wedding cake. I don't know if anyone out there listening has done this. I'm sure many of you have, but Nathan and I, after we got married, also went through this I guess ritual tradition of saving a slice or a layer of our wedding cake and putting it in the freezer. Spoiler, it did not taste very good a year later. Probably not helped by, I don't know how many times our power went off within that year.
Yeah.
Just living where we live. So probably got a little bit soggy, then frozen, then soggy, then frozen.
It was like the denim trousers.
Yeah. So I don't know if I can recommend that, but there is something sweet to that idea. And again, my mother kept for years in the freezer. I remember feeling so attached to a chocolate chip cookie that we had kept from our wedding that was in the freezer, and those cookies were good.
They
They
were
were
good.
really good
With salt
cookies.
on
And I
them.
mean, that cake was amazing too. I know wedding cakes don't always get a reputation of tasting very good either, but I'm not quite sure fully what my interpretation is here with my mother kept for years in the freezer that cake, but it feels like that shared experience of something that also shows that holding on to that love and keeping it, savoring it in the cold.
It is. It's cold as preservation, and coldness obviously preserves. We use fridges and freezers when the body dies and it's in frozen conditions, it takes a lot longer for the bacteria to break it down.
Yeah.
So there's something in here about, we're talking about love and something about preservation, but also about expiration. Again, there's the opposite tensions at play here. This, when after I had read this, I was like, okay, I'm going to go read about ice and frozenness, and I went down the rabbit hole of reading about how a body decomposes after
Right.
death. So my search history is very interesting based on
Okay.
this poem, but it I don't even know what to say. It was illuminating, and it's always weird to read about that because there's always that like, so that's what's going to happen to what was me or what was part of me.
You twisted man.
And then I was like, okay, then I was thinking about like, you get the light, the movement towards the light, like a moth. But like when you end, when you die, we say, or we hear stories from near-death experiences. I saw a great light. I saw this opening. And we have ideas of a celestial heaven,
Going to
a
the light.
godliness, going to the light. There's this final moment that, despite death being the darkest and most mysterious thing we can really contemplate, there's this like light that also happens. Again, dark and light are playing in opposition to each other.
Love and grief, dark and light. You talked about preservation earlier too. So how about even the like a pressed flower? It's again on that same theme. What you literally do with a pressed flower to save it, to save something beautiful. I've done that at funerals as well. Kept a rose from funerals and press it as a way to capture and save something so delicate and fragile, which I think that's also such an amazing choice of words for that reason, showing the fragility of the woman and the man, thinking about them as a pressed flower. I also wanted to highlight, and this is something that I've noticed in doing more of these episodes with you, is I'm getting really excited as you're talking, because I'm like, oh, there's that. Oh, I didn't notice that before. Oh, what about this? And that even just it gets even more amplified when I'm editing these videos. I felt very strongly with the last episode that as I was creating a video to go along with Lisa Marie Basile's poem, that I took all these new interpretations from it, all of this new meaning from hearing her poem over and over and over and trying to build something, hopefully, that honored her poem in a symbolic way. And there were so many things that came up as I was doing that, being like, darn, I wish I said this, this, and this, because now I'm taking this from the poem. So I know already I'm going to have a very similar experience in creating a visual for Lexi's poem. And the more times I read this and the more times I hear it, again, the more meaning I extract from it. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this poem and about poetry in general.
And that's, how we bring it. Generally, why we bring art and literature, poetry into conversation, it's because it's a deepening. If we're sticking with the the frozenness, it's an iceberg. We're deepening into something that isn't always available to us when we first read it, and we keep should we come back to a poem that really resonates, we'll find new meanings over and over. Because you could explain this poem, two people went out and they died, and then a couple turned the light off. It loses, even saying that felt weird. Like it's just lost its whole,
Mm-hmm.
it's lost the whole meaning and the whole language that is insinuating this deep grief and this fear and acceptance sense at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And when we bring it to these spontaneous conversations, because we don't really discuss these beforehand, because we want to come with fresh interpretations rather than overly blending what
And
each
not
other
influence
thinks.
each other.
Exactly. So I love when we come to this, like we said with the man on top of the woman, and you thinking of like, oh, why are they there? I'm like, oh yeah, so much comes out, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even consider that. Oh, I didn't deepen my sense of that line enough. And yeah, I appreciate that you pull these out. One thing on the craft, 2-line stanzas, couple, man on top of the woman.
Right.
Yeah,
Ah.
yeah. And then at the end, pass the hand cream. I'm going to do this. You get the light. My work here is done. You turn that off. But everything plays out in couples
Mm.
in that sense. So that's why, to me, it's crafted like that. You have the 2-line stanza, and then you have the white space, the snow, the breath, the silence between them.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about? I think the only part of this poem that we haven't really touched on, well, there's two things. The first is the idea of not being able to see what's in front of you, being so close and yet so far, so close for literally for this couple to being in warmth and safety. And then again at the end, it coming in saying we'd role play safety. I think that was doing something in my head, those two distinct parts of the poem, but I think they're still interacting in a way of that idea of being close and far to safety, close to death. You don't know when your death is also coming. That's also something that you never know, that distance. So I don't know if any of that's making sense, but that's another aspect of the poem I think I really wanted to highlight.
And is that also like that's happening there? Is that a comment on the beginning? Like the man lies on top of the woman, and it's role play because it's like, we're definitely gonna die.
Yeah.
This isn't gonna save either of us,
Mm.
though there's warmth at the end.
We just don't know when.
Yeah. And we're definitely gonna die now. If you're out in the, which sounds like Arctic temperature snowstorm, unless you're rescued very quickly, which is unlikely in this context, there's role playing. The man plays the role of the protector in this moment, but can't protect. Why is this the action? I mean, we've had it before, right? I've woken up to an earthquake and rolled over, and you're like, maybe that would help if the whole ceiling caved in and landed on our heads. It's like, well, am I just role playing?
Mm.
It's a good instinct, I thought.
You could smush me.
Yeah, I could have. It probably made it worse.
If that didn't make sense to anyone else, when Nathan woke up, yeah, with this earthquake, he rolled on like over me to shield me from whatever could have been happening with the earthquake. But me being half asleep, being like, "What? What's going on?"
And I guess it's better than if I rolled out of bed shrieking and ran off.
It left me. Yeah, that's true.
So I was role playing.
I love that we get the opportunity even to sit here and be indulged and speculate on what all of these different things could mean within the poem. Lexi, if you're seeing this, it would be interesting to hear you chime in on what went into writing this poem as well, what was the inspiration behind it. I think on that note, and speaking of things that we learned in response to this poem, I was learning a little bit about poetry analysis, which I feel like we're doing right now, as well as bibliotherapy, which I also feel like we're doing a bit of right now. Bibliotherapy can mean all sorts of different things and can look like all sorts of different things. It can be a bibliotherapist prescribing a book to somebody else, or someone self prescribing a book for themselves to read. It can also be something like this, reading a piece of literature or a poem and reacting and responding to it, which I've kind of found interesting that we've been inadvertently doing that this whole time, of giving ourselves a little bibliotherapy, which is got all sorts of health benefits. I'll put some links below if anyone's interested in learning more. But with poetry analysis in particular, we get the opportunity to do a few of the things that we already just did with this vicarious immersion. We're vicariously immersing ourselves in the world that Lexi has created here.
What's vicarious immersion?
It's kind of like what it sounds like in that you get to be vicarious. You get to, you get to be kind of like a voyeur
Mm.
in a story or in a poem and immerse yourself in it, fully integrate yourself into that without living it yourself, right? We're very fortunate to not have been in the same circumstances as couple in this poem, right? To be out in the snow. But maybe you can vicariously immerse yourself in that experience and again what that would feel like, which is I think partially why I had such an emotional reaction, is because I'm feeling as if I've lived some aspect of this poem or this tragedy in my head. I think my brain is spinning off into all sorts of different directions, but I think that's partially because when we read certain words, it triggers things in our brain as if we're feeling it. They say that if you read the word kick or blink or yawn, it activates those parts of your brain that are associated with kicking or blinking or yawning. So took us down a different path.
I love it. When you were saying, when I asked you what, I could interpret vicarious immersion, but I wanted to see like how you describe it. And when you described it, you got into like a poetry in itself. I felt when you described it that I now had a sleeping bag like pulled up while I was in the snow of this poem. Like I feel very like within this like Arctic feeling, though I do not feel cold at all,
No.
which is a really interesting opposites again. I like the idea of bibliotherapy. I love that there's so many reasons to turn to literature. There's so many reasons to take a poem and discuss them. And it's something, if people don't do this already, either with a loved one or with a friend, like take a poem, find a poem and discuss it. There's so much to be said. There's so much to be deepened. Like every time we come to this, we have these like fresh, new conversations that we don't have otherwise. We don't usually sit in our day to day and discuss poems like this in this depth. Very rarely, if ever, until we sit and put cameras on. We create our own ritual context and we include whoever in the world is watching us. Appreciate you here within that. But when it comes to this, yes, it's like this is profoundly. I'm not sure if I'd use the word healing. I'm going to use something that Kathleen Rain said, and I'm going to leap off it. She said that she doesn't believe that a poet ever has the experience of the poem except when they wrote the poem itself.
That's interesting.
So even if you're pulling from something that's entirely anecdotal that you've experienced in your day-to-day life and you go to turn it into a poem, you create a new experience based on all the different words. Like you were just saying, it brings up the same part of your brain as kick. It's like when you're playing with the new words and finding the right lexicon and language to use within your poem, you start creating these new experiences in relation to them. And you start feeling what is right and what most exaggerates, but in the sense of exaggerate so that the imagination of the listener can be like, oh, I'm there. I don't feel like I'm reading a lie. I feel like I'm really there. Again, this, I am there.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think you will not have had the experience of the poem you read except for the reading and future readings of the poem. So we create a unique experience by reading this and talking about it. And there's something in it That's therapeutic. To bring it back to bibliotherapy after my own tangents.
Do we need a tea break?
Yeah. I've also got some delicious, they call it English breakfast tea in the US. In England, we just call it tea. This is from China, and tea that we drink in England is often from India. So there's a lot of confusion of terms. And, you know,
Isn't supper tea as well in certain parts of England?
yeah, tea is supper / dinner.
That one confuses me.
I did want to bring up another point, and I know that I've said a lot of things, so
You have.
I'll phrase it very quickly. I read Emerson's essay, The Poet, recently, and he says language is fossil poetry, and that every word was once a poem. And when we write poetry and we give words new contexts and new meanings in their relation to the others, we create unique experiences for the imagination and the listener.
Well said.
Thank you. Now, you say something.
What do
Sorry.
I do with all of that
I'm sure
information?
the tea's not going to stop me from talking more.
Let me extract some responses.
Yeah.
I bet you know this quote. So I'm going to quiz you a little bit.
Oh, I mean, oh, darn.
Oh, no.
Jeepers.
The MLS. I'm going to ditch.
I love MLS. Sorry.
The Emily Dickinson quote about how she knows when it is poetry. What's that quote?
I don't know it exactly, but it's like, if I feel that the top of my head has been taken off, I know that it is poetry. Now, a friend I have and me have made fun of that quote.
Really? I
Yeah.
like that quote.
I
Why?
like it too. I think it's very poetic, and I understand the notion behind it. I don't know. He started it, and it kind of made me laugh about, like, when it feels like my toenails have been clipped, I know that it is poetry.
Very poetic response, I
Yeah.
guess, to
So
turn
it's
it.
why I kind of like wanted to laugh. But yes, what she's saying poetically is, when my whole body and my whole attention and everything in me is brought to life, I know it's poetry. I
Mhm.
don't need to question it. I know it because I feel it.
Yeah.
So my serious answer.
And I asked you that because I really felt that with this poem. And to go back to poetry analysis and the idea of poetry being therapeutic, we've dedicated a whole video to asking that question about, is poetry therapy? You know, there's some room for debate there about, is poetry therapeutic or is poetry therapy? If you've got a strong opinion about it, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section.
It's definitely not therapy. I'm just trying to stir controversy so people respond.
Nothing like an absolute statement
Yeah.
to do that.
That was a joke.
They always say, even just in relationships, that you should never use language like it's always this way or never this way, or like there's always some room for nuance. Things are not always black and white.
Oh, let's stick there. I'm even going to put this poem down for a sec because I think this is a fun thing to go on for a second.
Okay.
I want to say I always believe that to be true, but in my worst moments I don't. But you're right. And I
I'm
think,
always right.
yeah, obviously, like, I've never, ever, ever seen you be wrong.
I've never, ever once been wrong,
Yeah.
actually.
Except
Roll the tape.
Also, I had an old maths teacher who used to say, he would say it tongue in cheek. He was actually a fantastic teacher. He would say, the only time I made a mistake was when I thought I made a mistake. So
That's good.
If you want a mantra for a really successful
No,
marriage and
I am wrong
relationship.
all of the time.
Yeah. So back to the seriousness. Yes, definitive statements leave no room for nuance, and so much communication is nuance. So much communication is miscommunication. Why does not speaking about a poem, even though we're doing it in a collaborative sense about how we're interpreting it and we're having a conversation around it, but how differently we came to it, and rather than being like, no, that's not what that meant, there's an exploratoriness, there's an openness. The definitive isn't here. Poetry lacks definitiveness. You might have a definitive expression, but it doesn't have a final definition of this is just what it means.
I mean, that's an excellent point, and I think it always needs to be said whenever we're reading somebody else's work.
Always needs to, yeah.
Always, always needs to be said. If we ever, never don't say it, that's a problem.
Well said. Always.
Did I double negative myself? I'm not sure.
I'm just having fun.
That, of course, this is our interpretation of Lexi's poem. There are going to be 1,000,001 other interpretations of the poems that we share on the Poetry Vessel podcast. But I love that we get the opportunity to dive deep and discuss them, because apart from when you're in school and you're maybe in your English class, or if you're in a specific poetry class, we don't often get the opportunity to sit down and analyze a poem with someone else. I always loved that in school. Maybe I was just a bit of a, a nerd, but that was some of my favorite parts of English class, was looking at a particular paragraph and breaking down what something could mean. I think that's why I became interested in psychology later in life, that kind of desire to analyze something. But you can also lose a lot of the beauty in an over analysis of something, just like you can, you know, you can't chalk people up to being a textbook, right? So you can over analyze a person as well. And I think it's the same with poetry. I'll link some more studies for anyone that's equally interested below. But one of the aspects that I think is fascinating, I didn't use the word interesting
There
that
you
time.
go. Very poetic. You made a swerve, an icy swerve.
About poetry analysis. Not only does it enhance critical thinking, it's great for children to be exposed to poetry analysis, and maybe further than analysis is really just poetry discussion. I invite you also to, again, listen, take a look at these poems, listen to them, maybe discuss them with a friend or a loved one and see what they think. And I think it can bring up some really enriching conversations between you.
I love most of what you're saying, but I want to push back slightly on the children and analysis.
Okay, good.
One, I like that you enjoyed the analysis, because a lot of people I meet, they tell me that's what put them off. Analysis is great. Talking about a poem is great. I think where it breaks down, and this is not what you were saying, is when the insistence from, let's say, the teacher is, what does the poet mean? What does this mean?
Definitively.
Exactly. There's a, no, that's not what it means. Sometimes it's, I've worked with 4th and 5th graders on poetry in schools, and I use Rilke's poem, The Panther, the Stephen Mitchell translation, about the panther that's walking back and forth by the bars. And sometimes, I'll be like, what do you think's happening in this poem? And sometimes they'll say things and I'm like, I can quite safely say it's taking place in a zoo. And Rilke, I think, was in Paris at the time. It was about a Parisian zoo. But there's a panther in a zoo, and they're what the bars are. So if they speculate like he's within like a prison house with a prison guard or something, it's a fun act of imagination. But I'm like, okay, but it's probably not what's happening here. So interpretation isn't this endless. It can be absolutely anything, because I think there's no grounding. It's all air.
Mm-hmm.
And in interpretation, let's bring in the other elements. You need your earth, you need your water, and you need your fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there will be things, or there will be a set of facts somewhere in the poem. If you said that poem, that's got nothing to do with the cold, you'd be like, okay, now please enlighten me in, logically why you would say that. And just the kind of, it can be too flimsy, is my point. They're like, oh, it's whatever you want it to be. It's like, it is, but there's a container, the poem. So you are still dealing with the expansive container of the poem, the vessel of the poem.
Should I argue with you now? I'm just kidding.
Well, because you're always right, what I just said, just strike it off.
It's not making the cut.
Yeah, oh yeah, you've got the editing. You're like, this is.
Could just repeat you saying that that I'm right to me.
You can make a fun compilation.
No, you are so right in saying that. That's an excellent point. It isn't endless, and I would commend you for being so polite in your response of, to that hypothetical person that would insist that, the poem doesn't have some elements of snow or ice or something in it. I guess that also speaks to the idea of people's perceptions of poetry itself, and maybe if they can write a poem themselves. So I watched a TED Talk recently from a man named Daniel Tisdale, who talked about how he knows that you're a poet. I already know you're a poet. We're all poets. And I'm going to let you know how I know that. And it was a really interesting TED Talk because he broke down all of these different layers, like we are talking about earlier, layers in the poetry making process, and how everyone already has the experiences in them to create a poem. I think I thought about this a lot the other day, and speaking about grief and your question at the beginning about love and grief, we were talking about my grandma who passed away. And I remember thinking, because I said to you that I was like, oh, I feel like my grandma sings in my head sometimes. So to give some context, my grandma.
Beautiful poetry line, by the way. Start your poem.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
keep going.
My grandma loved to sing. I don't know if she was the best singer, but she loved to sing. She was the life of the party, my grandma Ruth, which is a very grandma-like name. I feel like. But there was a particular song that she sang, and I played it for you the other day. And I remember thinking the thought of, I wish Nathan could step into my brain and write this poem and preserve this memory that I have of my grandma, because I have these images of her. And then I watched this TED Talk, and I found it really helpful because it started breaking down that process of, if I were to write that poem, how I would approach writing the poem. So do you want me to say some of the questions and things that he brought up?
Hell yeah. I want to hear more. Just before, can you say, do you know what the name of the song is?
It's a sin to tell a lie.
And are there any lyrics like a lyric that sticks out from that song?
My cousins, if they ever see this, will laugh, because towards the end of her life, she sang this all the time. So every time we went out to dinner, she would sing this song to us. Even when she was in hospice, she used to frequent the same restaurants, and there were these musicians that came to her on her deathbed while she was in hospice care, and they played for her, and she sang along with them. And my dad has some videos of her in her bed in hospice singing along. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So she was a wonderful woman. So in terms of lines from that song, I think it goes, and I'm not going to sing it because I do draw the line somewhere of what I'm willing to do
We're
on there.
we're here to hear singing. Poets sing.
So be true when you say I love you.
So be true when you say I love you.
It's a sin to tell a lie.
There you go. I love how uncomfortable you look.
I'm really uncomfortable. I'm probably going to cut that.
Oh, you got to keep it. It's so fun.
And there's a different part, like, if you break my heart, I'll die. So be sure to be true. when you say I can't do this.
The Poetry Vessel, the musical.
Blooper reel.
So yeah, you were saying, and then you wanted to go back to the TED Talk bit.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
We'll see if my singing makes it into this episode. I can pretty confidently say that it probably won't. But anyway, to go back to the TED Talk. It just got me thinking about all of these different images of my grandma, and he opened this TED Talk with asking the audience a very similar question. And it's a little bit sad, but I hope you can stick with me here as I try to recreate what he was talking about. So he asked the audience to think of somebody they loved that they lost. For me, it was my grandma, right? For him, it was a good friend that unfortunately ended his life. So take a moment to think really deeply of that person that you lost. And I know this can be a really hard and challenging thing to do sometimes. Sometimes that's really painful. So if that feels like too much for you right now, just feel free to listen along. He also invited the audience to sit and write down any thoughts that came to mind about that person. What's the first thing that you thought of? So his example in this TED Talk was their laugh. For me, I think it was that song her singing. It's a sin to tell a lie. So the first tool that he focused on in the TED Talk was imagery. So what he encouraged in terms of imagery were thinking about the following questions. And I really do think that anybody can do this. There were, what sights and sounds come to mind when you think of this person? What smells do you associate with them? What food or drink did they love to taste the most? What was the feeling of their touch? What do you miss the most?
Hmm.
So really focusing on the senses about a person. And I think you'll come to find when you think about those things and you think about a loved one, and they don't have to be gone. It can even be someone in your life. Maybe you want to write a love poem about somebody. Thinking about those senses that you have associated with them. And then he also asked the audience to think about an unexpected sense with them, right? I guess, again, for me, it was, I'm not necessarily sure she was the best singer, but she would sing her heart out, right? Something that's maybe unexpected, then rather than she was an opera singer that was, a professional or something.
That also helps bring humor in.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're saying it's an imperfect thing, and you can laugh at she wasn't good, but she loved it.
Yeah.
That makes us feel better sometimes.
Yeah. And then he also brought in things like comparison. So we've talked in the past about simile and metaphors. So, what season is this person the most like? Or if they were a game, what game would they be? But my point is, and his point was, that we've all lived a lifetime of experiences. We've probably all loved somebody or grieved somebody at some point in our lives. So we all already have everything we need to make a wonderful poem. I think it's, and you can correct me as the actual poet here, but I think it's about building those skills that help you better articulate that imagery, better compare, better preserve these memories. So hopefully one day I can write a poem in honor of my grandma, or I can get your help maybe to write a poem about my grandma. But it just really made me think about, not that poetry is a formula, because I don't think it's necessarily a formula, and he broke it down in like a more formulaic way. But those tools can really help you in really looking and thinking about either a person or the world in a poetic way. So.
It was really nicely put. I like to call to the word imagery, because he's right and you're right in that imagery means sense images. So we think of image and we think of sight, but it means as you were saying, all the senses are being brought in. There's a really cool thing that Robert Bly says. I think it's put in a collected essay collection, Looking for Dragon Smoke. But he says to try and start a poem with a sound, because it's very obvious to start with sight. And that doesn't mean it's wrong to do that, but it's like kind of like challenging you to like, how can you bring sound in straight away? How can you compel the ear that is going to listen to a poem by using the sense of sound itself? And it's so funny. It's something that you tell kids, and it's something you remind adults, and it's something that I sit down if I'm looking at a poem that I've written or that someone else has written. Do all the senses come into play? They don't always all have to, but the more that you bring in, the richer it is. You know, the poem that we're looking at today starts with tactile, the man on top of the woman. It starts with touch. It didn't start, I mean, there's an image in it, you can see it as well, but like when you really think about what that is, it's like, oh, they're touching each other. So when you do go to write anything, and it doesn't even just have to be a poem, it's any scene, the more that you build up sensory, the richer it is for the imagination. I think we've said this something similar before, but if I said like the scent of lavender incense wafting past our faces,
I love lavender.
but you can, it's there. You know, you're saying like the same parts of your brain are alive. It's like if you've smelled lavender before, hopefully you enjoy it. I feel like I've never met anyone that says they don't like the smell of lavender, but you know,
Someone out there will.
there's always exceptions. That also brings me to bridge to something Mary Oliver said about being careful with, she said how you use metaphor, but also how you use senses. Because sometimes, and I'm not going to use these words, I'll read a poem and they'll bring a sense of disgust to me, often olfactory.
Huh.
And not that I'm saying never do that, but think about the effect that has. I've been put off poems because I use a certain word that is not nice for me. And because I experience, the more poetry I've written, the more I experience the world bodily in the senses, like more than ever. And it gets increasingly more powerful, which is a blessing and a curse. Because when people say things, you've seen me, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm eating, some people can talk about anything when they're eating. I've made a joke before about my mum eating an apple watching surgery. She used to be a nurse, just being like, casually it's there. Whereas I'm like transferring all the different like textures and sounds and smells, and I'm like, I can't do this. So when you do, if you're going to share something, be aware that it's going into an ear or an eye if they're reading it.
Isn't it phantom contagion? It's kind of like an element of phantom contagion.
The murderer's jacket thing.
Yeah. Or like, gloves or something that if you even if the gloves have been cleaned, everything's fine, but if a murderer has worn those gloves, they're going to carry a type of, energy or something. And that can also be, I think, with feelings of disgust, or like if you associate, like, if something, I don't know if it's like if something's been near the trash, I forget
Yeah.
like what the example is, but you're like, oh, that's dirty because I've now associated with that, even if something is clean.
You've categorized it here, so
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. But it feels like a mental phantom contagion.
And with that, I mean, that's, we have talismans and amulets and things where we're like, this is protective, this is a ritual object, this thing is good. We were speaking
Mm.
about this the other day with art, right? It was like, I read, oh God, what's her name?
Nathan looking at his bookshelf.
I read a book on beauty by Elaine Scarry, and she was talking about when an object becomes so beautiful, it elevates to being as if it's living. And I would argue that beyond metaphorically, it is living. So we spoke about art. And if there's a really beautiful painting, it could be a Van Gogh, it could be anything. If someone were to slice it, you even cringed when I said it, and I don't like even saying it. It's like you're taking life force. And I was thinking about how art, and I was specifically thinking about Van Gogh, because I know that there's paintings of his in the Getty in Los Angeles that we've been to a couple of times. How the body is compelled to move towards a beautiful object, how the eye is drawn towards the beautiful object. And what is interesting in poetry, especially when you hear it, is like your ear and your imagination is drawn toward the beautiful sound. So, in that sense, we see things beautifully as infused with life spirit. And the contagion is like we see it infused, not necessarily with death spirit, but like with something that's like, ugh. We have a revulsion to it. Now, I think we've said it before, you have a ring, you have a wedding ring. You infuse a lot of meaning into it, but it holds it as well. It feels like the object holds it. And you've had things before where you're like, this doesn't feel right, or this feels really right. If you've held something and it feels really right or it doesn't feel right, and you can't always explain it. Vibes. Bad vibes, bro. I've been in California too long. I'm just vibing all over the place. Bad vibrations. Everything's vibrating anyway.
One of my favorite examples in art, thinking about being drawn to a piece of art and the kind of energy and life that a piece of art can have, is with Michelangelo's David. And I'm sure probably some people out there will already assume they've zoomed into the David already when I've said that.
Yeah, I'm there.
So we can see this in real life too. So I wish I could remember the name of the museum that it's in Florence. But when you go to this museum in Florence, and I've taken this in part from my mom because she was the one that highlighted this to me first years ago. But when you go and visit the David is at the end of a long hallway in this room, and it's like there's like a dome, and the David is sitting underneath this dome. And you can walk all the way around the David. But in the walkway leading up to the David are Michelangelo's slaves. And these are sculptures that were unfinished. And I believe they were intended for a tomb. I forget for what pope or cardinal or something that they were intended for. But most people, when they go into this museum, they walk straight past the unfinished sculptures and go to the David. And the David is a massive, beautiful, incredible sculpture that has a life beyond itself. And it's something that it feels like for humanity, it's something that it's collectively treasured in art. Like no one else has attempted to create a sculpture as magnificent as the David, in my opinion. But these other sculptures are really interesting for a few different reasons, because you can see all of the work that Michelangelo did to make something so polished and so beautiful like the David. So they have chisel marks, they have imperfections, they have their figures that are coming out of the stone, partially. I would really encourage anyone out there to look them up and to, obviously look at the David and look at these sculptures that are leading up to the David in that hallway. But I always found it really interesting being there, how many people zoom past and don't look at all of that work and time that technically goes into a sculpture like the David. And to me, there was always something poetic about, and again, my mom had shared this with me, and I think I really embodied this perspective from a young age of like, oh, but look, you can see what his hands did. And I forget kind of what my point was as well.
Show you're working out.
In this. But maybe it's also with poetry. It's very different because when you see a poem, you're seeing a finished piece, right? You're seeing something maybe like the David. You're not seeing all of the chisel marks. You're not seeing everything that went into that poem, all the different edits, all the different failed poems before they got to that finished piece, especially when we think about, the best poems of all time. I really like seeing the mess ups, the poems that have been deemed failures. How do you feel about that in your own work in terms of like the poems that you cast away versus the poems that you choose to keep and continue to work on? Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, yeah. So I have one response just before I answer that. I like the idea that there's the grief of the unfinished, but the love of the labor, like contained in all the chiseling, contained in all of that, and like everything, like life is unfinished. You never finish. You never go. No one turns around and goes, "Okay, we're done here. Like I've done everything I need to do. My time here on Earth is done." I mean, people might get to that conclusion, but
We
there's
should be so lucky.
oh, yeah, but there's always something. There's always something else. I mean, the very act, the very nature of meaning is applying to something. You have to do things for meaning. You have to reach for meaning. You have to think for meaning. Like meaning isn't just like, you have all the meaning. Nothing. Like I don't believe that that's how it works. So to answer your question on poems, it's what did I write once? All your bad poems are pregnant with better poems. Keep writing. Which was a note to myself, but I also posted it onto Facebook. And so many poems do not work on their own. But so many poems are practicing for what comes later. Something comes back. Something is being tussled with. What I'm trying to work out when I'm writing, I'm trying to work out a problem. Now, maybe the problem emerged because of the start of the poem, but there's something to be worked through. And
Hmm.
when the psyche is ready to tell you you've worked through it, the poem will come and the poem will emerge in its proper clothing. And that can change again. We can edit a poem for our whole lives. Things aren't necessarily finished. You can keep going. There's always one more chiseling to make. But, there's an argument to be made that all poems, at some sense, fail. They fail something. Language fails. Language falls. Language doesn't say exactly. It can't translate. I cannot tell you exactly what I think and feel, and for you to receive that exactly as intended.
Hmm.
We're playing. Language is playing, language is dancing, poetry is play and dance and joy and celebration. And what the poem that is successful ends up being is hopefully like David. And I don't just mean for me, I just mean this generally, is a work that transcends the personal, that transcends the even interpersonal, and reaches something that's archetypal or even in the realm of myth, a godlikeness, something so sustaining. You think of the sculpture of David as being, you just said it's like this pinnacle of human making. That's the level that art and me as a poet aspires towards. Whether anything gets there, maybe never. But that's the aspiration.
Mm.
Might not have answered your question, but I felt impassioned.
I liked what you were saying. I feel like I often have like 10 thoughts ago, I have like a response to something you said. And then by the end, I'm like, I need to make sure that I'm listening to make sure I hear every bit that you say. And then I forget what I was going to say before. But because you brought up problem solving, and I think that's interesting that you're solving a problem while you're creating a poem. And to bring back bibliotherapy apparently, allegedly, is very good for problem solving and can help people work through, reading a book can help people work through certain problems in their life. I think I used to look at reading as either a means to an end. You're in school, you're learning something. I need to read this so that I learn this so I can regurgitate this information or absorb this information back.
Mm.
Or I looked at reading as maybe frivolous. It's leisure, it's relaxing. There's, the books out there that can seem like junk food, and then there's books out there that can be really pleasurable. So I hadn't really considered deeply the effects that reading and all different types of reading nonfiction, fiction, poetry, etc., can have on the brain and the body of or in the psyche of a person. So, with problem solving specifically, what I learned is that, and this probably won't shock many people out there, but I feel like it needs to be said that if you give a depressed person a depressing book, or maybe a depressed person a very depressing poem, it doesn't necessarily help the person work through their depression because they need to see a character that's problem solving specifically. And they talked about this more in reference to a book than to a poem because I feel like in the book, at least my understanding of it was with a book, somebody needs to see that a character can make it through something. And if the character fails to make it through a similar problem that maybe the person has, that's not going to be very encouraging for people.
Yeah, right.
But
This book told me to give up.
yeah, so I found that interesting, fascinating as well.
So very quickly, it's like the idea is like the act of just being like all reading is therapeutic is basically not the point.
Yeah, and there's plenty of times where bibliotherapy would not be recommended for somebody. Someone that's experiencing psychosis, bibliotherapy probably is not the right choice for them. Somebody that hates reading more than anything, maybe bibliotherapy is not the right choice.
So very quickly, people turn to AI for therapy, and also there's big problems that I've read about people allegedly with psychosis or schizophrenia having a lot of problems using AI, a lot more problems. And I wonder the link, there's a type of bibliotherapy happening because you're reading what the AI is putting back.
So I think it's always good for me to put out the disclaimer. I'm not a therapist or
Neither am I.
or a lawyer.
Neither am I.
So please consider that information when listening to anything that I say or that we say. But I think there are a lot of problems with people using AI for therapy. Most of which I don't think we have time to go into on this podcast. But from what I've experienced, and I'll just speak from my own experience anecdotally using various AI chatbots, is the propensity to agree with the user, and that can sometimes go too far. It's important for a lot of reasons that either the people in your life or your therapist don't just blindly endorse everything that you do and twist it into something positive for your own benefit. So I think that's like a major problem with people using AI for therapy is, maybe there's plenty of times when behavior needs to be readjusted, so to speak, and maybe you need to hear some hard truths. And I don't know if AI is going to give you the best advice. So I would strongly discourage anyone from using AI as a therapist. And there's been some really alarming things that have already come out with people doing that. I do understand the AI for a lot of people is always there, so to speak. You can message AI and get a response immediately, whereas maybe your best friend or your partner, you got to wait for them to respond, read it, respond, all of those different things. I know I am notorious for taking way too long to respond to people with text messages and things like that. So I understand the impulse to want to go to something, especially when you're feeling alone and afraid or you need advice, and maybe your therapist isn't available or your friend's not available and you need to talk to somebody. But I think there's so many avenues out there that would be a better source of help than ChatGPT or any other AI models.
Yeah. And the point is, you're not talking to a human.
Mhm.
You're talking to something that's simulating a human response based
Mhm.
on data.
Mhm.
Without going too far into that, because that could take us
We could talk
many
about that
hours.
for a really long time, and we're not AI experts either. I've done some AI
We are,
training.
we are AI though.
I've actually done some work AI training and have worked on projects where that are testing those different things about how a model should respond to prompts that contain people seeking, therapy or legal advice or all sorts of things from from um, from AI. So I think more work needs to be done before that could be reliable for anybody. But anyway, I think to go back just for a minute, though, we've been having such a beautiful conversation about bibliotherapy, about poetry analysis, about love and grief and celebration and all of these different complex ranges of emotion. And of course, about mystery in life being so close and yet so far to certain things like.
Can't reach you.
I just did.
Damn it. Ruin my metaphor.
Ah.
The podcast is over.
Like Lexi so beautifully put. But I would love to bring in some more poets into the conversation with some mystery box poems. And I will say first that we currently have a whopping 9 people in the mystery box. So any of these 9 poets could be drawn today on this podcast, and I'm really excited to see who comes up. We have no idea what poem is going to be read. While we spent a lot of time with Lexi's poem as the featured poet, our responses to the mystery box poems are typically more spontaneous. So if you'd like to get into it, let me move this out of the way and we can bring Francis B. Malloy, the mystery box, over to the center if you like.
Oh yeah. Francis. This is a bit of poetry vessel lore that we've talked about before, but Francis the mystery box.
Yes.
He's in the middle. You probably can't see him on the camera.
I'll hold Francis. And we're back.
Or
Oh
her.
yeah, we're back in the US. So if you watched our last episode together, our last 2 episodes on the podcast, we were in England visiting Nathan's family. So we're finally back in the US, which means we are reunited with Francis.
Yeah, we did an episode I did one with Rachel and I did one with my brother Alex. But we didn't have the mystery box. The mystery box was house sitting. So all right. Wow, it can dance. So yeah, so how would you like to do this? Would you like me to open it and you pull one out? I mean, you should read because I recited the last poem.
Okay, I can do that.
So
You hold
who
it.
gets divinatory? Do you want to pick at random as well?
Sure.
All right. Without further ado, right, let's see. How is it? Yeah, there we go. Right, let's make that look best.
We'll have a sound.
That's what I always feel like. Okay.
Make sure they're all mixed up. We haven't put them in any particular order.
No, and I'm
It's
shuffling them.
totally random. Eyes are covered.
Okay. Put
Ready?
your hand forward and just pick anything.
Okay. Is the box facing me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I won't show you the wax seal on this one because it's not very pretty. But we've been sealing all of our all the mystery box poems with a wax seal, which I think is pretty special.
I like the wax seal.
Okay. Ooh. This is going to take us in a different direction.
All right, well, that's what the mystery is all about, this labyrinth.
This poem is by Gary D. Grossman, who is a professor emeritus of animal ecology at the University of Georgia, has poems, short fiction, and essays in over 70 literary reviews. He doesn't enter contests, but his work has been nominated for awards. No wins yet, though, so meh, he writes.
Nice one,
I
Gary.
appreciate the honesty, Gary. He enjoys running, music, fishing, and gardening. His poetry books, Lyrical Years, What I Meant to Say Was, and Objects in Mirror May Be Closer Than They Appear, and graphic memoir, My Life in Fish, One Scientist's Journey, are all available from the author or on Amazon. And we'll put Gary's website up on the screen as well. Please check out Gary, and thank you so much, Gary, for submitting to the Poetry Vessel podcast. We're happy to feature you as one of our mystery box poets. Without further ado, this poem is called The Buddha's Precepts. The couple seated in front of us refuse to sit down, even when the MC arrives on stage. And every time I lift a foot, the oak slat floor echoes Velcro. Given its veneer of stale beer and danced-on peanut shells. All those things the sutras tell me to leave behind. The linebackers standing in front, the overactive heating, exhaling floor stench, the cell phones angering the dark. And then the front man picks up, his road-scarred 1959 Telecaster, the one he wrote the band's only hit with, and strums the first riff of that song. Fingers jetting up the neck to high octave A's and D's, notes so sharp I feel them only as newly oxygenated, blood jitterbugging in each lobe of lung. Here I am, body and soul, negating every precept of samsara. Suffering, origins, causes, paths. Nothing cleaving me from joyous notes. And who knew Gautama would return, shedding major thirds and fifths instead of light.
I like the Buddha becomes a musician.
Mm-hmm.
There's a relation here.
There was. I know. I realized that more as I was reading.
A couple things very quickly. I was just talking about when you bring in senses, and what I really like what Gary's done is bringing in something that's not necessarily pleasant, like stale beer, but it's brought me to the scene. It hasn't made me recoil. It's just been, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that familiarity, and I felt really like connected to that. And there was something in the, by the way, newly oxygenated blood jitterbugging in each lobe of lung is so good. Jitterbugging. I've like never. Have you heard that before? I've not heard
No.
that term. I'm like, that's one of those ones I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel what's happening in
Well,
jitterbugging.
And he's bringing in the percussion in his words, I feel like, with the music that's happening on stage. And how relatable as well, this poem. I won't go into the full details, but we've been at concerts before, obviously, where, you know, he's saying here almost like the frustration of other humans in these concerts, and I felt that. The line in particular, the cell phones angering the dark.
Oh, that's such a
Cell
good
phones
term.
angering the dark. Sometimes I feel like when I'm in these venues or these concerts and everyone is so focused on filming on their phone, and all you can see is the light of other people's phones and them all filming the whole song or whatever it is, that it can distract you from being in the moment of being there in that room.
And isn't that, I mean, we're talking about Buddha, being in the
Mm-hmm.
present, being there, watching, hearing, feeling the guitar, the music, the singing.
Mm-hmm.
I love angering. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's such a, because it's angering to others, but it's the phones that are angering the dark. I love it.
And like you said, is like I can smell the room. I can feel like the stickiness on the floor of spilt beer and all of these different things. So this poet did such a wonderful job dropping us straight into that scene and also showing the conflicting feeling that you might feel of, okay, I've been working on this, just, don't be irritated by these people, but ooh, okay, like remember what you've been practicing, and yet, so
Kind of
I,
like, I'm at peace, you bastards.
at least that was my interpretation of this poem. And again, I love the musicality in the words that take us from fingers jutting up the neck to high octave A's and D's, notes so sharp I feel them only as newly oxygenated blood jitterbugging in each lobe of lung. Woo,
And that neck, it
right?
becomes like sensual when it's like going up the neck of the guitar, but like the way, what was the word used for the movement of the fingers for the neck of the guitar?
Jetting,
Jetting. From
jetting
jetting
up
to
the neck.
jitterbugging. Like there's something about that so like, I don't know, it's sensual. And where was it? There's the link.
Jitterbug.
Oh right, that was it. It's the, I mean, you said it, but it's like notes so sharp. And this is where the slice of the earlier poem and the sharpness of music and the sharpness of ice. There's nothing in this poem that is icy in that same way. However, here's here's the main link. They both end with exactly the same word.
Do they really?
Fifths instead of light. You get the light.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
And they
we
both
have,
start with a couple.
they both start with a couple. This is the divination that comes through. There's a reason why you picked this. And even if there's not, it's fun to think so. And suffering, it's Buddhism. Life is suffering, is the idea. And this poem, there's suffering. In this poem, suffering, grief is there. So is anger. And love, the love of music.
So this answers, is there grief and love in every poem? Do you feel like now, through this conversation, can you answer that question confidently?
Well, we're 2 for 2. So my data set at the moment that I'm basing this on is 2 poems out of the billions.
That's
How
why
many
it's
poems have been
important to
written?
look at the population or the sample
Yeah.
size, folks.
And we need
100%.
we need a meta-analysis of all poems to be like, can we check a box that says love? Yep. Grief? Yep. And I was kind of crafty at the beginning of the conversation to say, well, it's the love of making and it's the grief of ending, which is probably a bit of a cop out to be like, obviously, so I'm right. It's more a framing than I think anything that can be stated definitively. But I think you could find it in everyone if you looked hard enough, or if you framed your desire to do that, you could probably find it.
Yeah.
I was right, always right.
We're good at doing backflips to confirm our beliefs.
I have a poem of Gabriel, who's the line is like Gabriel fed up of harps. Gabriel's an archangel in the Christian tradition. Gabriel, fed up of harps, sneaks down Jacob's ladder, Jacob would have the dream of the ladder going up to heaven and down, which the angels can ascend and descend on, to steal earthly instruments to bring them back to heaven so that they can play black metal instead of harp music. So it was funny that they had Buddha in that poem be the musician, and I was like, oh, and like kind of like shredding, like Guatema's Buddha. You might know that already, but I thought of that when I was like, oh yeah, I have it where it's like, well, Gabriel is shredding. So apparently I like when angels or religious figures play modern music.
Amen.
Yeah, I just want to thank Gary and Lexi both for sending us their poems. It was a joy to have the chance to read them and discuss them.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. If you want your own chance to be featured on the Poetry Vessel podcast, again, visit www.thepoetryvessel.com, read those submission guidelines, and hopefully we can read your poem and share your poem soon here on the podcast together.
And also, these poems are here to be discussed. I would love to hear your interpretations. I'd love to keep a discussion going, and I want us all to expand our understanding of these poems through these discussions. So let us know in the comments what you thought of them and what it brought up for you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear what you got value in. And of course, if you're not ready to submit your own poem to the Poetry Vessel, you can also join our mailing list. That will also be in the description below as well. I also wanted to say we have a very special episode coming up next week, so make sure you tune in and listen.
Yeah, and perhaps the spirit of Lorca's duende will find its way into the lantern of our poems.
Ooh, nice. And
Yeah.
speaking of musicality in poems, Lorca. Oh my gosh, we could talk forever.
I think we'll dedicate a whole episode to Lorca now that you're an expert.
Yeah, I think after 3 weeks of editing.
So obviously we frame this conversation around whether all poems have love and grief in them. I want to know what you think about that, what you thought of the conversation. If you want to see more like this and you want to support poetry and free speech conversations happening right here on the Poetry Vessel, do all the good YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, comment, and share this with a friend. Who knows? They might be surprised by enjoying the poetic conversation, even if they don't consider themselves poets. Yet. We're all poets. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye. High fives. Love it.